I'd like to take a broader perspective, if I can, really pick up a little bit on some of the points that Leonard and Esra made in their talks. The digital age has self-evidently transformed the field of journalism, both here in Ireland, in the UK and across the world. And people now have a massive range of providers, as we know, to choose from. Here in Ireland, there are the obvious sources: RTE, TV3, News Talk, the Irish Times, the Irish Independent, and a wide range of regional radio stations and other notable newspapers. But here also people can access traditional international news providers via satellite TV and the web, such as the BBC, ITV News, Sky, CNN, Al Jazeera, Russia Today, and so on. There are British newspapers, US newspapers, and others freely available, obviously. And then there are the news sources of what are generally accepted as journalism of a different type. News on social networks like Twitter and Facebook, as Esra was alluding to. 1 million blogs of hugely varying quality with their own agendas, and some highly influential, such as Guido Fawkes' blog, and I know Paul's going to be speaking here later on today. And all those different types of journalism are rated very differently in terms of trust by the audience. A recent survey here in Ireland by Edelman suggested that traditional media here is trusted by 64% of the audience, which in an age of scepticism is quite high. That compares with only 19% who trust social media. And I guess all that's a pretty long-winded way of saying there isn't a single answer, in my view, to can journalism be trusted in the digital age. Some journalism can and some self-evidently can't. I'd like to focus in my talk a little bit more on the traditional media here in Ireland and in the UK, and more particularly on RTE and on the BBC, who have both had their own share of ups and downs in the last couple of years. I must say it was a slightly strange experience for me arriving at RTE a little over a year ago, as we continued a process of recovery from 2 major journalistic mistakes, then only to witness my past employers, the BBC, go into near meltdown over 2 major journalistic mistakes, compounded by some pretty outrageous executive payoffs. The reaction to the journalistic mistakes both here and at the BBC was rightly angry and outraged, but that in itself tells a story. Namely that RTE and the BBC have a very close and trusted relationship with the audience. The expectations of our standards at RTE and at the BBC are rightly very high, and we face an extremely close level of scrutiny as organisations that matter hugely to the fabric and to the people of our countries. So any mistake will be rightly and publicly examined and punished and accompanied by a public sense of outrage and disappointment. There is, of course, nothing worse in life than being let down by someone who you admire and rely on. Mistakes can undermine trust, and trust is the lifeblood of organisations like RTE and the BBC. So to ensure that our journalism can be trusted in the digital age, how do we first of all avoid mistakes, as far as is possible, and then, almost as importantly, how do we deal with mistakes when we almost inevitably make them? Firstly, an organisation like RTE and the BBC stands for a set of values. They're enshrined in a strong and clear set of guidelines, but almost more importantly than that, they run through the veins of the people who choose to work there. I've been incredibly impressed with the journalists I found at RTE and their unswerving desire to tell stories honestly, accurately, and fairly. It's the same culture that I witnessed in the BBC newsroom. It's the calibre of the people which cements the quality and therefore the trustworthiness of most newsrooms. Of course, there will be mistakes or misjudgments in any environment where human beings work. And in the RTE newsroom, we have to take hundreds of decisions every day, and a number of tricky and complicated decisions every week. There's careful discussion and thought put into all those by a series of well-qualified and experienced people. And all we can assure our audience is that we do our very best to get things right as far as we humanly can. Beyond clear values and the calibre of the people, there also, in my view, needs to be the right culture in an organisation, namely a culture where debate and discussion are encouraged. In my view, the greatest mistakes happen when there is a culture where challenge is discouraged, frowned upon, or even punished. I've seen it at times over the years in the BBC where some senior managers surrounded themselves with people who would simply agree on almost every major point, and that leads to major mistakes happening. Resources remain important for a trusted news organisation, To have enough people in the right places and in the right jobs and with the time to do good journalism is critical. First-hand reporting of major news stories will still define the very best journalism from simple aggregation of second-hand copy. And lastly, and critically in my view, courage and integrity. The courage and integrity to run stories when they're difficult and challenging. Even sometimes the courage to take a considered and calculated risk. The courage to challenge those in power or in authority. To challenge those individuals with deep pockets and rooms of lawyers and with strong influence. For RTE and the BBC, there remains the question of how we handle mistakes when they're made. And this is the other side to maintaining trust. It's critical we're strong in our editorial judgment, but it's equally vital that we admit mistakes when we make them and apologise where necessary. At RTE, I'm pleased to see there's an increasing culture of openness led from the top, where we're accountable and not hidden behind Fortress Montrose with the drawbridge firmly slammed shut. We're fully open to discussion and debate, as any publicly funded organisation should be. That openness extends to quick corrections or apologies when we're wrong. Not always easy in a competitive and questioning media environment. However, as Richard Nixon famously found out, it's not always the mistakes that do for you. Any sense of a cover-up will deliver the killer blow. One of the things that I'm most proud of so far in my time at RTE is the re-establishment of investigative journalism. For many years, RTE had a proud record of investigations. Then there followed Mission to Prey. Following the disaster of that programme and all that flowed from that, the reputational damage to RTE, the questions raised over our standards and procedures, the high prices paid by a number of very good people who were involved. RTE investigations were on hold. However, in the early summer of this year, the RTE Investigations Unit, led by Paul Maguire, delivered the incredibly powerful Primetime and Islands Creches. It was an immensely difficult but important programme to make. But it showed all the strengths that I feel we have rebuilt or reinforced in RTE News and Current Affairs. It was public service broadcasting, reflecting our core values. The team were first-rate people. There was a culture throughout of constant questioning and argument. It was sufficiently well-resourced over months and months, and it showed some real courage to take on some powerful companies supported by armies of lawyers and PR companies. The story dominated national debate for weeks, and I sincerely hope it'll help to improve the lives of many Irish children. It's that kind of investigative journalism, I think, which reinforces the trust that your audience, the people, have in an organisation. It is true, trust levels in RTE dipped after the Mission to Prey and frontline presidential debate. However, they're now back up to their previous high levels, something we're very proud of. But we cannot be complacent. We have to prove day in and day out that the values and standards that I've described are alive and well in RTE and in RTE News and Current Affairs. And in my view, if you prove that, that is the way to ensure that there is a source of journalism in the digital age that can be admired and trusted. Thank you.